In this video, we're going to talk about the validation blueprint for your no-code app. So how to really simply validate your no-code app idea so you can move forward confidently with the development, the launch, and ultimately the growth of your app and your business. Now, make sure you stick around until the end because this is often a really complicated process. And the reality is it doesn't need to be. So we're going to break down a series of steps that you can go through and immediately implement for yourself and for your own app so that, again, you can move forward confidently and ultimately get that app into the hands of users. Now, first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to either start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses, all without coding and with no technical background required. So, validating your app idea. Again, this is a process that gets really overcomplicated, and it can make it hard to move forward quickly with your app. Now, there's a reason for this. There's a reason for this complication, and I want to talk about it so that you might be able to gain a different perspective that helps you move forward faster, right? So traditionally, the way to build your own app, to launch your app, to grow your app-based business was to outsource to traditional development agencies. Now, to build a really simple MVP, minimum viable product, this can easily cost $75,000, $100,000, $200,000. I mean, the price tags can be outrageous. And that's just for the very initial upfront cost of the development of a really slimmed down product. Now, imagine that you want to actually grow and maintain that product. Well, you can imagine how much that's going to cost from there on out. So validation, making sure that it's worth it to invest in that app idea is incredibly important because most people don't have that kind of money lying around, and the process to get it is also very intensive, and it's just not easy. It's not quick, right? So a very thorough validation process is really needed. Now, we're looking at no-code apps. We're looking at leveraging no-code tools to help us quickly build and launch apps and app-based businesses. Okay, now, yes, you need to still validate your app idea. You shouldn't be coming into this and investing your time and money into something that you have absolutely no idea whether there is a need for. Okay, you need to be validating, but you can validate in a different way because it doesn't make sense necessarily to go through that same validation process in anticipation of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on the other end of it if you're not spending those hundreds of thousands of dollars on the other end of it. That's part of the beauty and the advantage of no-code tools is they allow you to move forward quickly without such large investments. And at the end of the day, when you're validating an idea, you're making assumptions. Yes, you're making educated assumptions, hopefully, but they're still assumptions. You can't actually completely validate until you launch the product. With no-code tools, you have a major leg up because you can still make those same assumptions in relation to your idea validation, but you can much more easily validate those assumptions by actually building a product with much less time and money investment on your part. Okay, so the complication comes from feeling like you need to follow the validation process that is created for people who are planning to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into their apps and their businesses. If that is not you, and for the clients who we work with, they don't fall into that, right? They are looking for a lower upfront investment so that they can move forward sooner, that they can move forward quickly, and they can validate their product and actually start growing their business a lot more easily, okay? And so if that's you, then you can have a fairly simple validation process. Now, I do want to say that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach because I don't know what your situation is, but I'm speaking to this because we work with entrepreneurs who are looking to build app-based businesses, launch and grow app-based businesses. And this is the type of process that helps them get to the point where they can actually start bringing users on board and achieving the things that they're setting out to achieve by using no-code tools. So a simple validation process that you can go through. We're going to talk about that now. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can jump over to the whiteboard and go through this more in depth. So let me make us full screen here. All right. So let's say you have your app idea right in the middle here. What we want to do is go through 5 different steps or stages really to determine whether your app idea has validation. All right. So the very first thing that I want you to look at, I'm going to put this right up here, is your target market. The first thing that I want you to do is make sure you have defined your target market. Now we're starting at the very base here. So this is simple usually, but often it's something that goes overlooked. A lot of people have an idea first and they don't stop to think about the problem they're solving, the people who might have that problem, what sort of outcomes they need in a solution, right? So this often goes skipped over and is thought about later after the app is built. It's much harder to actually bring users on board if you step back and think about this after you've built your app. So make sure that you have defined your target market, okay? Who's going to be using your app and who specifically? So if your answer to this is something like consumers are going to be my app's users, that's not clear. It's not clear enough, okay? You need to dig deeper and you need to differentiate your app and who your app is for in some way, or define who it's for, because when you are connecting with your target market, you need to be able to help them understand exactly why it's for them specifically, and it needs to be easy to convey that. It's hard to do that if you haven't defined your target market. It's much easier if you have. So how can you define your target market? Again, I want you to get clear on this. I don't want it to be really broad or really vague. So you should start looking at common differentiators or segments of an overall target market. So you can look at things like industry. You can look at job title, right? Or role. So what if your app is business focused, then what industry is it applicable to? What job titles or roles within companies is, which people within a company, for example, are going to be using your app? Who would be the users? Who would be the buyers within a company if your app is for other businesses to use, right? You can also look at demographics, okay? You should be looking at all these things: demographics, age, location, potentially income, depending on what your app is for, right? You don't want it to be for anyone and everyone, because again, it's going to be harder for you to connect with people once you are actually trying to convert them into becoming users. You can also look at things like interests or values. So, a lot of people when they're trying to really nail down their target market, they're trying to fit into an industry, they're trying to fit into users with certain job titles or something like that because they feel they need to. You don't have to define it in that way if that doesn't fit your app. You can define your target market by the interests they have, by the values they hold, right? Think about from a bigger picture standpoint, how you're going to start to differentiate your app from existing alternatives out there. And these things start to play a bigger role. So this is the number one thing that you need to make sure you have down at the very start. Who is your app for? Okay. Now, The second thing that I want you to look at are existing alternatives. Existing alternatives are other solutions that solve the same problem that your app is being created to solve. Now, I'm not saying other apps or competition. I'm saying existing alternatives. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you want to have other solutions out there that people are using that solve the same or a similar problem that your app will be solving. Now, this can be other apps. It can be, competition that or companies who you might see as your competition. It can be processes that are manual. Maybe people are solving the problem that you're going to be solving currently with spreadsheets. Maybe they're hiring staff to solve these problems that could otherwise be automated. There can be lots of different existing alternatives, but whether that comes in the form of an app or something different, by having existing alternatives out there, that serves as really easy validation that the problem your app is solving actually needs to be solved, right? If there are other processes, apps, tools, even positions within companies that are dedicated to solving this problem, then that's good validation. It's really good, especially if there are other apps out there. Don't look at it as competition, right? There can be many similar apps and solutions out there that just have some differentiators, and we'll talk about that more. But by having the existing alternatives, and we're going to say here, apps or otherwise, you now have a second layer of validation for yourself. Okay, you have a defined target market that has a specific problem, and now you know that that target market is currently using existing alternatives to solve that problem. It's a very good sign. Okay. Now, the next thing that you need to think about with your particular app idea is you want to make sure it fills a hole. Okay. So you have a specific target market. They're using existing alternatives. Well, with your app, what hole does it fill? You don't want to just go out there and copy the existing apps that might be out there, right? That's not going to serve you or your users. You need to differentiate your app in some way. And so it should fill a hole or something that is not currently being met, a need that's not currently being met. So you can now backtrack a little bit and say, okay, there are these existing alternatives out there. Maybe one is an app. Maybe one is a process of using a bunch of spreadsheets. Well, what are the holes in those, right? If you're looking at an app that solves a similar problem or the same problem, what needs are still going unmet, right? If you're looking at spreadsheets or something like that, I'm just using that as an easy example, but what are the holes with that? Is it manual error, right? Is it time consuming with these other apps that might already exist? Is it, the segment of the market that they're serving? Maybe it's not niche enough, right? What are the holes that exist in these alternatives? If you can fill the hole with your app in some way, then you have an extra layer of validation. And the reason why I say that is because you're taking a problem is there, a problem that's already being solved, but you're just finding a better way to solve it in some way for your target market. So you can see we're really tying all of these together. So what you want to look at here is that you want your app to be different in some way, right? You don't just want to copy another app. And you want to look at unmet needs. Okay. And if you can find things like this, it's going to make it easier for you to convert users onto your app because you have an even more defined market. You've already have your target market. Now you've found some unmet needs or something that could be improved, and you're delivering that to them with your new solution. Okay. Now, the next thing that you want to look at is you want the problem that you are solving to have some level of urgency. So I'm going to say here, urgent problem. Now, there are tons of apps out there that don't solve really urgent problems. You can think about apps that maybe add some level of convenience, maybe that are geared towards entertainment or something like that. And yes, you can be successful without solving a really urgent problem, but it's easier for you to get started if you've identified a problem with some level of urgency. Okay, so look at urgency on a spectrum from, let's look from 1 to 10. 1 being the problem is people don't know they have the problem, all right? When you have to teach people that they have a problem, that's a lot more work on your part, okay? So no urgency at all because they don't even know they have the problem, all right? 10 is they are currently wasting tons and tons of money, tons of time. Their lives are impacted in some way. Their businesses are impacted in some way. They are missing out on major levels of convenience that would allow them to maybe grow their businesses in other ways if they had that level of convenience, right? These types of things. So really big impacts. The higher up you are, right, on this spectrum, or the farther to the right rather, the more validation you have. Now, that's not to say that an app on the left side doesn't have validation, but we're looking at validation in the sense that you can feel comfortable or more comfortable and confident moving forward with your product and building the product and actually getting it out there. And it's always going to be easier for you to do that if there's some sort of urgency in some way. Okay, so what we like to look at usually is when your app, it saves time or money. Okay, if your app saves someone time or money, whether it's business related or whether it's focused on consumers, that naturally is going to put it a notch up on the urgency level. Okay, if it makes someone time or money. Okay, so let's say that your app is geared at businesses to help them increase their lead flow or something like that. Well, you're helping them make money. Let's say your app is helping businesses streamline their operations. You're helping them save money. Let's say your app is aimed at consumers and you're helping them not have to do some tedious tasks that they have to do constantly in their lives. Well, you're saving them time, right? So looking at that, you're automatically increasing the urgency of the problem that you're solving. And you should also look at this from a convenience standpoint. Okay, convenience. So does it add convenience for someone in some way? Because that convenience can very often be worth a lot of time, a lot of money. So you can look at it from that standpoint as well. Okay, now the last thing that I want you to look at is default users. Default users. Okay, so when we're working with clients, they're coming in, they don't have to have their users already decided on or their users already lined up knocking at the door. That's not the case, but they do have some tie in some way to the industry for which they're building their app, whether that's business related or consumer related. They have some tie. Okay, maybe they've worked in this industry before. Maybe their career is in this industry. Maybe they are a consumer within this industry and they have a lot of knowledge, right? When you have some tie to the industry you're building your app for, whatever it is, then you automatically are going to have a set of default users, right? This is what we call them with our clients, at least, your default users. So people who are going to be kind of like low-hanging fruit for you to reach out to when you're ready to start testing your app. Okay. This can be really easy. It can be really simple, and it should be, right? When you are launching your app, we want you to be able to move forward really quickly. We don't want to overcomplicate things. We want you to have early traction. Okay, so having some default users or just a tie to your industry, right? Tied to industry. It's going to help you move forward a lot more quickly. Sometimes I see people who, they have an app idea and it's just not related to anything they have knowledge on. Okay. That's automatically creating a higher barrier for your entry into this space. If you don't have any knowledge on the people you're building your app for, the problem you're building your app to solve, the outcomes that are needed, it's going to make it harder on you. Now, some people who we work with, they have connections to an industry in some way. So maybe they have a partner who works in an industry, and that gives them some sort of knowledge, some sort of tie, right? You just need some sort of tie. Now, again, as with all of this, you don't have to have this in order to be successful. Sure, you can be successful dipping into a brand new industry that you don't have any knowledge of. But again, we're looking at validation that helps you move forward quickly, a lot sooner, and actually build traction with your app. So bringing users on and not having to go into a really long and drawn out process of trying to actually monetize the thing. Okay. So stepping back here, we have your target market, right? Define your target market. Have some sort of narrower scope on your market other than consumers or something like that, right? Businesses. Right? You can look at this in a lot of different ways that we've gone over, but have some sort of definition, because then you can at least start to say, okay, I know I have a specific person who I'm building my app for, and they have a specific problem. That is the very first layer of validation. Then look at existing alternatives that those people are using to solve the problems they have, whether those existing alternatives are apps or otherwise. This is a good thing. If people are already solving it, and bonus, if they are paying to solve this problem, they don't have to be, but if they're paying to solve it, bonus, that's even further validation that this type of solution that you're building is really needed. Okay. But again, you're not just looking to copy other solutions out there. So you want to see where your app can fill a hole. How can you make it different? How can you help meet currently unmet needs within those existing alternatives? If you can connect that back to problems that your target market has, again, more validation and some differentiation to make it easier for you to, once you launch your app, to actually start growing in. Looking at problems that have some level of urgency. The farther to the right you are on this 1 to 10 spectrum, the easier it's going to be for you to build up quick traction. Don't have to have this to be successful, sure, but is it going to help you? Definitely, definitely. Does your app help people save time or money, or does it make them time or money? Does it add some level of convenience? That is extra validation for you. And then, do you have some tie to the industry? And we're going to call, the reason why I called this default users is because your tie to the industry gives you access to default users. Even if it's small, that's okay. You have a foot in the door, and this means that there's something there. There's some reason why you're the one who's building this app. And that's what we want to see. Okay. Now, could you go through other steps to validate your app idea? Yes, yes. And you may very well already have gone through other steps. But again, we're looking at using no-code tools to be able to actually validate your product. Because if you validate your idea, that's great. That's the first step. But you still have to validate your product, because idea validation, it's still assumptions. Okay. When you actually build out the product, you are building out your assumptions. Okay. So you have to actually test the product, put it into users' hands to see how they need it. So when you're validating your idea, you're seeing, do they need it? Validating your product, how they need it. Okay. Because you can make a lot of really good assumptions, but ultimately, until you can start testing your product, you're not going to be able to actually grow your business because you need the feedback. So it's when we're looking at no-code tools, you can get to that point so much more easily. You do not have to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get your first round of user feedback. You can do it so much more quickly and with such a lower investment, okay? And that's what's going to help you ultimately just move so much more quickly with your app and with your business. So I'm going to close us off there. And I want you to be able to take this and just confidently move forward with your app. And if you have already started building your app, and it's okay if you have and you haven't yet gone through all these, but just take a moment to think through them anyways. Because if you do that, even if you've already gotten started, then you're going to really just help yourself make it easier on you down the road. You're gonna make it easier on yourself down the road once you actually launch your app. If you've thought through all of these things, if you've implemented them into your own process for building your app. So hopefully you find value in this. I know that a lot of people can use it because it's such a complicated process, but you can simplify it. And by leveraging no-code tools in the right way for your needs and your goals and your app and users, you can just move so much more quickly with your business. Now, if you are moving forward with your app and you want to get to the point of being able to bring on those users so that you can start getting feedback and start scaling from there, we help entrepreneurs every single day go from their idea to having that scalable, custom, optimized app. We work with them in our mentorship program where we guide them through a really structured process because it can be so complicated to build and launch an app if you've never done it before, even if you're using no-code tools. And so if you have decided to move forward with your app because you want to get to that same point of being able to really start growing it, then you can schedule a strategy call with our team where we can help you put together a roadmap that will help you work towards your goals, again, with your app, particularly your target market, and really just help you move forward strategically. You can head to coachingnocodeapps.com/apply to set up a call, chat with our team, and see how to best move forward with your app. All right, again, I hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.